Welcome to MCN. We're in Spain for the launch of the BMW F850GS Adventure. So the GS obviously came out, the 850 version came out earlier in the year, and now it's been given the adventure upgrade, if you like. So the idea of it is to make it more of a grand tourer, more capable off-road, but also more capable for longer distance events. We've had a pretty comprehensive test, to be honest. Sometimes when you go on these launches, you do predominantly road and you do just some off-road. Yesterday we rode about 270 kilometers from Malaga to Granada, and probably about 50–60% of that was off-road. So we've really got to put it through its paces on the off-road environment, kind of on twin track riding, but rocky, quite sort of hilly, few water crossings. So a real comprehensive test to kind of generally understand the bike. So what we're going to do is just work round the bike and explain what are actually the differences from the standard model to the adventure model. Right, so the fundamental differences with the adventure are it has additional wind protection and weather protection. So this comes in the form of the extra fairing here. Also the screen on this particular model, this is a rally version, which the screen is actually quite considerably smaller to the standard version, but the screen is very easily adjusted. Simply that lever there, up and down, does make a difference, does work well. I guess the biggest change is the fuel tank. So it's up to 23 litres. So it gives you a theoretical range of anything up to 500 kilometres. So kind of, you know, in excess of 300 miles. Difficult to say whether we'd actually achieve that sort of figure because the riding has been a lot of off-road, and obviously off-road is not particularly fuel efficient, but I can imagine that you could get good miles out of it with that range and quite a frugal motor. The other addition is the crash bars. These ones have been used a little bit, wasn't me for the record, but they did their job and protected everything else. So they're the sort of fundamental differences. This particular version I've been riding today is the rally model. So like I mentioned earlier, it has a slightly different screen. One of the fundamental differences is actually the seat. So the seat on this bike is 20mm higher than standard, but is also much flatter. So it enables you to be able to move around the bike a lot better. Also comes with the Aquapovic exhaust, which is an upgrade and addition, just makes it sound a little bit fresher. Does sound good, to be fair. So what's it like to ride? That is obviously the main test. I've been pretty impressed, to be perfectly honest, with a 21-inch front wheel. The front feels planted. You've also got the old GS, the fuel tank was at the back, and that sometimes affected the balance of the bike, especially if you had luggage on it. The fuel is now back at the front. You've got big capacity here, even though the tank is wide here. Right here where you're actually standing, it's particularly narrow, and I really kind of you felt like you could really maneuver the bike. You could use your knees to put into the tank if need be, but you just felt like you had room. And it also means that even with that slightly higher seat, I'm about 5'9", 5'9.5" on a good day, and I found that I could pretty much put my feet practically flat on the ground, even with the higher seat. So, which is obviously quite a key ingredient to a bike if you are taking it off-road. Power-wise, it's putting out a claim about 94 horsepower. The connection is good. It's got quite a nice amount of punch off the bottom, and the power is particularly linear, just sort of progresses quite nicely, which means if you are sliding the bike, you can control the slide quite easily. There's so much to play with in the terms of the bike. You've got suspension settings, electronic rear suspension, so you can basically set that up for different parameters, whether you're on-road, off-road, pillion, luggage, etc. This bike also comes with a TFT dash, which, you know, complements the BMW, is a real work of art in terms of the information that it displays, the way you can navigate around it, and the fact that you can almost, doesn't matter what sunlight is coming onto it, whether it's dusty, you can still read it, and that is obviously a key ingredient. So in summary, on the riding, I found it balanced, I found it easy to ride. Some of the tracks we've been on have been quite slippery, quite loose, and always felt pretty confident with the bike, and because it's narrow, never felt too overwhelming when I did actually have to put my feet down. Okay, so one of the key aspects for anyone making a decision on buying, for sure there is no issue that it is a quality bike, well put together, feels more like its big brother in terms of the comfort and the weather protection and the wind protection, and it has that kind of plush feeling which will make it a go anywhere bike, and you wouldn't really have any dramas doing some big miles on it. But obviously cost is a big factor. So the standard model, I mean, is £10,600. That's for the base model, but the way BMW operate is you have a plethora of aftermarket accessories, or factory accessories should I say, so you can basically up-spec your bike to what you want. The standard rally version, so this is the rally version, they're the bits I mentioned, things like the different seat and the exhaust, would bring the bike to 11,750. But this particular bike, in the spec that it is £14,675, and that's because it's got the TFT dash, which is an extra, it has the quick shifter, which is an extra, it has additional rider modes, which are all extra. So the price does climb quite significantly, but you have the ability to be able to kind of tailor it to exactly what you want. So that's obviously a buyer decision on the budget. It kind of fits, to put that into comparison. I think this bike's closest rival would be something like the Honda Africa Twin Adventure Sport, which comes in from memory about £12,495. So the base model's cheaper, but if you up-spec this one, it can become more expensive. So budget-wise is relatively similar depending on how far you want to go. And they actually are two very, very similar bikes. But all in all, I think BMW have done a good job. It's a significant upgrade, certainly over the old bike, and the adventure derivative of the 850GS is another step again to be a real, bike capable of taking you all around the world, pretty much whatever the conditions, whatever the terrain. Right, we're here with Michael Schweck, who is the project leader for the BMW 850GS. Thanks for joining us. It would just be great to understand your design brief and the motivation for building this bike, and what you see are the key ingredients, the key factors that have taken it to the next level.
Yeah. Well, the basic task was to transport this attitude to be able for a World Adventure Tour X Factory. That was basically the main target setting, and of course, out of this comes, I think the biggest assets or differences is, of course, the riding comfort and the wind and weather protection, and of course the big fuel tank. And these are the main topics that make an adventure in our opinion. One big thing was that we get really a balanced character between the sporty and off-road oriented basic 850GS, and also to implement a good touring and long distance characteristics for the rider.
Okay. And in terms of how do you decide how big the tank was, for example? Because did you have a target range of what you wanted to be able to achieve from the bike?
We had some target range, of course. We are coming from the F850GS Adventure, so it was obvious not to move to such a big change. And then it's It's a question of the package, how the big fuel tank fits into the complete vision of the bike.
Sure.
And the packaging. It's always an estimation between how much you can put in, but it shouldn't be too much. So,
Yeah.
but at least 500 kilometers was a basic target, because otherwise we don't need an adventure.
No, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so we came out with this 23 liters who fit perfectly in the design line. Gives you also a small tail for your stand-up riding position, and still have enough fuel left. So it's 1 liter less than at the F800 Adventure, but on the other side the engine is more efficient and consumes less fuel, so you will end up in about the same or slightly better range.
Perfect. Michael, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, you're welcome.